I subscribe to an academic service that sends me scholarly articles, and they have a search function that sends me scholarly articles that refer to me. I just got one I wanted to talk about. It's quite amusing. It's written by a communications scholar, a PhD at the University of Texas at Austin. This guy's a professor in Queens, New York. His name is Michael Lacey, and the article is called Black Frankenstein in D'Souza's 2016 Obama's America. So the article is an analysis of my Obama film. And the article is full of the typical academic gobbledygook, but fortunately there's a sort of abstract or summary up front. And that's the summary I want to comment on because it's just so typical, and it's also so entertaining. First of all, this essay offers a critical, rhetorical analysis of neoconservative filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza. Stop right there. I've never called myself a neoconservative. True, I was at the American Enterprise Institute along with a lot of neoconservatives, but I don't think I've ever been fairly described as one of them. He goes on to talk about my, quote, popular political documentary, and he goes, I argue that the documentary's narrative emulates conservative Black Frankenstein stories. Now, first of all, I've never quite heard that phrase. And so I was like, Black Frankenstein stories? Is this some kind of a genre? So I look it up, and it turns out there was a movie that came out a couple of decades ago called Blackenstein, which was apparently about a Black Frankenstein. But what this guy is basically saying is I'm using the Frankenstein theme, which, by the way, is never mentioned in 2016. But I guess he means I'm sort of subtly invoking it as a kind of dog whistle. The idea that Obama is a Black Frankenstein. Quote, whereby a monstrous black slave revolts against his white slave owner, justifying a violent white backlash to restore white supremacy. Now, it's really important to point out that one of the things I do right away in the Obama film is I make the point that this is not a film that is about race, or about slavery, or about the civil rights movement. None of those things. It is actually about something that involves white and black and brown people, but is fundamentally not racial at all. Namely, colonialism and anti-colonialism. See, the British didn't come to rule India because the Indians were brown. The British came to rule India because there was territory to be conquered and they wanted to be the lords of more and more land. And the British were ultimately modeled on the British. The Nazis tried to conquer land, and of course they conquered land in Europe. They invaded Poland. Of course, the Germans and the Poles are both white. So the idea of colonialism, or even anti-colonialism, is not, it intersects with race, but it's not fundamentally a racial idea. And so the notion here that somehow I'm presenting Obama as some kind of a slave revolter, kind of like Nat Turner who led a slave rebellion, is downright preposterous. Goes on to say that I use anti-black racist caricatures. Where are the caricatures? In Obama's America, I show Obama. In fact, the voice running as a narrative alongside mine is Obama's own voice. See, I discovered that Obama read his own book in audiobooks. And so I had Obama's voice, which I was able to play in the film. And the real power of that film was it's undeniable. You can't say I'm paraphrasing Obama. Here is Obama telling you about his own life in his own words and using his own voice. Then it goes on to say that I suggest that, quote, racism and colonialism no longer exist, which is absurd. And it concludes in this way. Finally, I argue that the popular conservative depictions of Obama as a menacing mulatto monster. So, by the way, this is itself a rather comical caricature of the film. And if you haven't seen the film, by the way, it's available on iTunes. You can easily find it. You'll find it very eye-opening because this was a film that I made around 2011. It came out in 2012. And you will see that at a time when Obama was not clearly understood, I think I got him right. You'll be able to see in retrospect that what that film says about Obama is clinically accurate. It's 100% true. But here's how the article concludes. Finally, I argue that the popular conservative depictions of Obama as a menacing mulatto monster destroying America were precursors of a white backlash against America's first black U.S. president and his multicultural coalition, culminating in Donald Trump's presidential victory. So I'm responsible in a single film, a single documentary, not only for, you may say, blackening Obama's reputation, but producing single-handedly the election of Donald J. Trump.